My wife snapped at me in front of her rich friends. You can't even satisfy me, let alone provide for me. I smiled, paid the bill for myself, and walked out. That night, she showed up crying, but my new girl opened the door. So let me paint you a picture of my life about 3 years ago, back when I thought I had it all figured out. I'm standing at the altar in this ridiculously overpriced venue that looked like someone vomited chandeliers and white roses everywhere, watching Clara walk down the aisle in a dress that probably cost more than my truck. And I'm thinking to myself, holy crap, I'm the luckiest guy alive. Everyone else was thinking the same thing, apparently. My buddies were giving me these envious looks like I'd just won the Powerball. My mom was crying happy tears, and even my dad, who never shows emotion about anything except football, looked genuinely impressed. Clara was stunning, no doubt about it. She had this whole polished, put-together thing going on that made her look like she belonged in a magazine spread rather than married to a guy who spends half his day covered in sawdust and the other half arguing with plumbers about pipe fittings. She worked in high-end fashion, which I didn't fully understand then and honestly still don't now. Something about curating collections and working with designers whose names I couldn't pronounce without sounding like I was choking on alphabet soup. But hey, she was passionate about it, made decent money, and looked like $1,000,000 doing it. What more could a guy ask for, right? Wrong. So incredibly, monumentally wrong. The first 6 months were pretty solid, I'll give her that. We'd go out to nice restaurants. She'd introduce me to her fancy friends, and I'd smile and nod while they talked about things like investment portfolios and real estate opportunities in the Hamptons. I didn't really fit in with that crowd, but I figured that was okay. Opposites attract and all that garbage they tell you in romantic comedies. I was the down-to-earth contractor with calloused hands and a toolbox in my truck. She was the sophisticated fashionista with a walk-in closet that could house a small family. We balanced each other out, or so I thought. But then the cracks started showing, and man, they weren't just cracks, they were full-blown canyons. It started small, like most relationship disasters do. Little comments here and there. Mark, do you have to wear those jeans to dinner? They have paint on them. Or, maybe you could park your work truck around the corner when we have guests over. I'd laugh it off, make some joke about how my truck had more personality than half the people at her dinner parties, and she'd give me this tight smile that didn't quite reach her eyes. Then it escalated. Suddenly, my entire career, the business I'd built from scratch, the reputation I'd earned through years of hard work and showing up on time when other contractors ghosted their clients, wasn't good enough anymore. It wasn't respectable, according to Clara. And let me tell you, nothing says, I love and support you, quite like your wife telling you that your job is basically embarrassing her in front of her friends. The breaking point conversation happened on a Tuesday night. I remember because I just finished a huge renovation job and came home feeling pretty damn good about myself. I'd turned this couple's nightmare of a kitchen into something that could have been featured on one of those home improvement shows. The clients were thrilled. I'd made a solid chunk of money, and I was riding that high of a job well done. I walked through the door, probably tracking a bit of sawdust on the carpet. Sumi and Clara was sitting on the couch with her laptop, scrolling through Facebook or Instagram or whatever social media platform was rotting people's brains that week. Why can't you get a proper office job like Marcus's husband? She asked without even looking up from her screen. I stood there for a second, waiting for the punchline, because surely she was joking. Marcus was her friend Olivia's husband, some finance bro who wore suits that cost more than my monthly mortgage and probably couldn't change a light bulb without calling building maintenance. But she wasn't joking. She was dead serious, still scrolling through her phone like she'd just asked me to pick up milk on the way home. I dropped my toolbox by the door, maybe a little harder than necessary, and walked over to the kitchen to grab a beer. Because the world would collapse without toilets and roofs, Clara, I said, popping the cap off with the bottle opener I kept on my keychain. Trust me, Marcus's spreadsheets won't save him when his bathroom floods at 3 in the morning and there's water pouring through his ceiling onto his precious home office. I thought it was a pretty solid comeback, honestly. Funny, true, and making a valid point about the essential nature of skilled trades in modern society. She didn't laugh. She didn't even crack a smile. She just closed her laptop with this disappointed sigh that made me feel about 2 inches tall, like I was a kid who'd just failed a test and brought home a report card full of Fs. You don't get it, she said, standing up and walking toward the bedroom. It's not about necessity. It's about status. It's about respect. And there it was. The truth bomb that would define the next miserable stretch of our marriage. She didn't care that I was good at what I did. She didn't care that I made decent money and owned my own business. She didn't care that people called me at all hours because they knew I'd show up and fix their problems when everyone else told them it would be a 2-week wait minimum. None of that mattered to Clara. What mattered was how it looked to her friends at their ridiculous dinner parties and social media posts. What mattered was whether she could casually drop my job title into conversation without feeling like she had to explain or justify it. I stood in that kitchen, beer in hand, listening to her heels click against the hardwood floor as she walked away, and I realized something important. I'd married someone who valued the wrapping paper more than the actual gift. And let me tell you, that's a special kind of soul-crushing realization. The moment when you understand that the person who's supposed to be your partner, your ride or die, your biggest cheerleader, is actually just embarrassed by your existence. But here's the thing about guys like me, guys who work with their hands and build things and fix things and keep the world running, while people like Marcus push paper around in air-conditioned offices. We're problem solvers. When something's broken, we don't just complain about it or post sad quotes on social media about how hard life is. We roll up our sleeves, grab our tools, and we fix it. And I was starting to realize that my marriage might be the one thing that was too broken to repair, no matter how good I was with a hammer and nails. That night, lying in bed next to a woman who'd somehow become a stranger, I stared at the ceiling and wondered when exactly everything had gone so wrong. When had I stopped being the guy she was proud to marry and started being the guy she had to apologize for? When had my calloused hands stopped being sexy and rugged and started being just dirty and embarrassing? When had building a life together turned into her trying to rebuild me into someone I'd never be? I didn't have answers that night, but I knew one thing for sure. Something was going to have to change, and soon, because I wasn't about to spend the rest of my life apologizing for being exactly who I'd always been. So about a week after the whole "get a real job" conversation, I'm sitting in my truck eating a sandwich between jobs, turkey and Swiss on rye. If you're wondering, because apparently my life has become so thrilling that lunch meat choices are notable details. When my phone buzzes with a text from Clara. Now, normally when your wife texts you in the middle of the day, it's something normal like, "Can you pick up milk?" Or, "Don't forget we have that thing tonight." Or maybe even something cute like, "Missing you." But no, this was Clara we're talking about, so obviously it had to be something that would make my blood pressure spike. "We're having dinner with Olivia, Bianca, and Sophia next Friday. 7 p.m. We're something nice. Please try to make a good impression." I stared at that text for a solid minute, watching a blob of mustard drip onto my work jeans, which already had paint stains from Tuesday's job and what I'm pretty sure was caulk residue from this morning. "We're something nice. Try to make a good impression." Like I was some kind of embarrassing pet she was bringing to a dog show, hoping I wouldn't pee on the expensive furniture or bark at the wrong moments. For those of you who don't know the cast of characters in Clara's little social circle, let me break it down for you. Olivia, Bianca, and Sophia were Clara's holy trinity of fancy friends, the kind of women who brunch on Sundays and call it brunching, like it's a verb that requires special skills. They wore designer everything, carried purses that cost more than my first car, and had the kind of perfect hair that looked effortlessly casual but probably required a team of professionals and enough hairspray to punch a hole in the ozone layer. But more importantly, they were all married to what Clara called respectable men. You know the type. Guys who wore suits to work, drove luxury cars they leased because actually buying them would be too pedestrian, and had jobs with fancy titles that didn't really mean anything but sounded impressive at cocktail parties. There was Daniel, Olivia's husband, who did something in finance that I'm pretty sure was just legalized gambling with other people's money. Julian, Bianca's man, who worked in tech and loved to talk about disrupting industries and synergizing platforms, which as far as I could tell meant he made apps that nobody needed. And Frederick, Sophia's husband, who was some kind of investment banker and had the kind of punchable face that made you understand why people invented the phrase, "eat the rich." These were Clara's idea of success. These were the men I was apparently supposed to aspire to be like. Never mind that I'd bet my entire toolbox that none of them could change their own oil or fix a leaky faucet or hang drywall without calling someone like me to do it for them. Never mind that I owned my own business, set my own hours, and actually enjoyed what I did for a living instead of spending 8 hours a day in a cubicle contemplating whether jumping out the window would be worth the workers' comp claim. I texted back, define something nice. Are we talking church funeral nice or job interview nice? 3 dots appeared, disappeared, appeared again. I could practically feel her frustration radiating through the phone. Mark, I'm serious. This is important to me. And there it was, the guilt trip. The "this is important to me" card that wives everywhere have been playing since the dawn of marriage. It's basically emotional blackmail wrapped in a bow of perceived reasonableness. If you say no, you're the bad guy who doesn't care about what's important to your spouse. If you say yes, you're signing up for whatever fresh hell they've planned for you. I sighed, took another bite of my sandwich, and typed back, fine. I'll dust off my tux and top hat. Should I bring my monocle too? Mark, kidding. I'll wear the blue button down. The one without any stains. Probably. Thank you. And please, just try to fit in. These are important people to me. Important people. Right. Because nothing says important quite like a bunch of overpaid pencil pushers who probably couldn't survive a week without someone like me keeping their houses from falling apart. But I was trying to be a good husband, or at least the version of a good husband that Clara seemed to want, so I agreed. The next few days were filled with Clara's increasingly anxious preparation for this dinner. She bought a new dress. Of course she did, because apparently the 700 other dresses in her closet weren't suitable for having overpriced pasta with her friends. She got her hair done, her nails done, probably had things waxed and plucked and primped that I didn't even want to think about. Meanwhile, I was getting reminders every 12 hours about how I needed to present myself well and engage in conversation, and please, for the love of God, don't make any jokes about toilets or plumbing. By the time Friday rolled around, I was seriously considering faking food poisoning. Not even in a dramatic way, just enough to get out of this dinner while still seeming like I'd tried. Maybe eat some questionable gas station sushi or something. But I could see how much this meant to Clara, even if I didn't understand why. So I sucked it up and prepared myself for what I was already calling the circus in my head. I came home early to shower and change, scrubbing the day's construction site grime off my hands with the kind of heavy-duty soap that could probably strip paint. Clara was already in full preparation mode, which in her case looked like a tornado had hit the bathroom. There were makeup products everywhere, hair tools plugged into every available outlet, and enough perfume in the air to make my eyes water. "You're wearing that?" she asked when I emerged from the bedroom in my blue button-down shirt and my nicest pair of jeans, the dark ones without any holes or stains. "You said we're something nice." "This is my nice shirt. I even ironed it." "Well, I threw it in the dryer with a wet towel, which is basically the same thing." She closed her eyes and took one of those deep yoga breaths that people do when they're trying not to commit murder. "Do you have dress pants?" "Khakis. Anything that's not denim." "Clara, we're going to dinner, not meeting the Queen of England. These are my good jeans. They cost like $80. $80, she repeated, like I'd just told her I bought them at a thrift store for 50 cents. "Daniel probably spends more than that on socks." "Then Daniel's an idiot," I said, grabbing my wallet and keys. "But fine, whatever. Let's go watch these clowns perform." The look she gave me could have frozen lava. "Mark, I need you to promise me something. Please, please just be normal tonight. Don't be yourself." And there it was, the nail in the coffin of whatever remained of my patience for this whole charade. Don't be yourself. Your wife, the person who supposedly fell in love with you and agreed to spend the rest of her life with you, is asking you not to be yourself because the real you isn't good enough for her friends. I should have turned around right there. Should have said, "You know what, if I'm so embarrassing, maybe you should go alone." Should have stood up for myself and told her that if her friends couldn't handle me making jokes about my job or talking about normal person things, then maybe they weren't worth impressing. But I didn't, because I was still operating under this delusional belief that maybe if I just played along, if I just made it through this one dinner and smiled at the right times and laughed at their boring stories and didn't mention the word toilet even once, then maybe Clara would remember why she married me in the first place. Maybe she'd see that I was trying, that I cared about making her happy, that I was willing to be uncomfortable if it meant she'd be proud of me. So I just smiled. Not a real smile, more like the kind of smile you give the dentist right before they start drilling, and said, "Sure, Clara, I'll be on my best behavior. Scout's honor. You were never a Boy Scout, she muttered, grabbing her designer purse. Yeah, well, they wouldn't let me in because I kept fixing things the practical way instead of following their ridiculous knot-tying manuals. Story of my life, apparently. She didn't respond, just headed for the door in her expensive heels that made her 3 inches taller and somehow even further away from me than she already felt. I followed behind, jingling my truck keys, already mentally preparing myself for what I knew was going to be the longest, most painful dinner of my life. And let me tell you something, my gut instinct was absolutely right. I just had no idea exactly how much of a circus it was actually going to be. So there we were, halfway through this culinary hostage situation, and the conversation had somehow shifted to vacations because apparently, when rich people run out of ways to brag about their jobs, they move on to bragging about how they spend their money on overpriced trips to places where they can take Instagram photos and pretend they're cultured. Olivia started it, naturally. She leaned forward with that excited energy that people get when they're about to tell you about something they think is impressive, but is really just expensive. We just got back from Monaco last month, she gushed, pronouncing it like Monaco, with this exaggerated accent that made me want to throw a dinner roll at her face. The yacht week was absolutely incredible. Daniel surprised me with a sunset cruise on a private vessel. Champagne, caviar, the works. It was like something out of a movie. That sounds divine, Sophia cooed, because apparently grown women still use the word divine unironically. We did the Amalfi Coast this spring. Positano, Capri, absolutely breathtaking. Frederick rented us a villa overlooking the water. We had our own chef, a private beach. It was paradise. Julian jumped in before anyone could respond, because God forbid he not be the center of attention for 30 seconds. Bianca and I just booked 3 weeks in Bali for December. We're staying at this eco-resort, super exclusive, solar-powered, the whole sustainable luxury thing. It's like 20 grand a week, but you can't put a price on that kind of experience, you know? Actually, Julian, you literally just put a price on it. 20 grand a week. But sure, let's pretend you're doing it for the environmental consciousness and not the bragging rights. They all turned to look at us then, and I could see Clara physically tense up next to me. She knew what was coming. I knew what was coming. Hell, the waiter refilling water glasses probably knew what was coming. What about you two? Bianca asked with faux sweetness. Any exciting trips planned? Clara opened her mouth, probably to make up some lie about how we were thinking about going somewhere fancy, but I beat her to it. We went to Lake Michigan in July, I said cheerfully. Rented a cabin for a long weekend. Did some fishing, grilled burgers, sat around a campfire. It was pretty great, actually. Cost us maybe $600 total, including gas and groceries. The look on their faces was like I'd just told them we'd spent our vacation dumpster diving behind a Walmart. A cabin, Frederick repeated slowly, like he was trying to understand a foreign concept. Like camping. Well, it had running water and electricity, so technically not camping. But yeah, pretty basic. That's kind of the point though, right? Getting away from all the noise and just relaxing. How? Rustic, Olivia said, and I'm pretty sure rustic was her polite way of saying poor. Daniel jumped in then, because apparently my vacation choices were so offensive they required intervention. You know, Mark, if you're looking for something more upscale, I could connect you with our travel agent. She specializes in luxury experiences. Maybe something in wine country, Napa, Sonoma, even just a long weekend at a nice resort could really broaden your horizons. Broaden my horizons. Like the problem with my life was that I hadn't spent enough money at overpriced resorts drinking wine that tastes the same as the $15 bottle from Trader Joe's. I appreciate the offer, Dan, but I think my horizons are pretty broad already. I've seen the inside of about 300 different houses in this city. You'd be amazed what you learn about people when you're fixing their plumbing. Way more interesting than a resort brochure, trust me. Clara's hand found my knee under the table and squeezed, not affectionately, more like a warning signal. Abort mission. Stop talking. For the love of God, shut up. But I was on a roll now, and honestly, I was tired of pretending like these people were better than me just because they had more money and worse personalities. Plus, I continued, I actually enjoy my vacations. I'm not spending the whole time stressed about whether I'm getting enough Instagram content or if I'm staying at a place that's exclusive enough to impress people I barely know. I'm just existing. Relaxing. Novel concept, I know. The tension at the table was thick enough to cut with one of the 4 unnecessary forks. Sophia and Bianca exchanged glances. Daniel coughed awkwardly. Frederick looked like he'd just bit into something sour. And then Clara, my dear wife Clara, decided to throw me under the bus so hard I'm pretty sure I left skid marks on the fancy restaurant floor. She let out this forced laugh. You know the kind, where it's clearly not genuine, but they're trying to play it off as lighthearted, and said to the group, "Oh, Mark just doesn't understand the finer things in life. He's very practical." Practical. She said it like it was a terminal illness. It's not about being practical, I said, turning to look at her directly. It's about not wasting money on overpriced garbage just to keep up with people who are probably drowning in credit card debt anyway. I saw Frederick's jaw clench. Apparently, I'd hit a nerve. Good. But Clara wasn't done yet. Oh no, she was just getting started. She took a long sip of her wine, probably for courage, or maybe just to give herself time to craft the perfect insult. And then she looked around the table at all her friends, making sure she had an audience for what was about to happen. The problem with Mark, she said slowly, deliberately, like she was explaining something to children, is that he's content with mediocrity. He doesn't aspire to anything greater. He just fixes things and calls it a life. The table went silent. Even the ambient restaurant noise seemed to fade away. I felt like I'd been punched in the gut. "Excuse me," I said quietly. She turned to face me then, and there was something cold in her eyes that I'd never seen before. Or maybe it had always been there, and I'd just been too stupid to notice. "You heard me, Mark. You can't even satisfy me, let alone provide for me." Time stopped. I swear to God, everything just froze. The whole table gasped, and I mean gasped, like we were in some kind of soap opera. Olivia's hand flew to her mouth. Bianca's eyes went wide. Sophia looked like she wanted to disappear into her chair. Frederick nearly choked on his lobster. Actually choked, started coughing, had to grab his water glass. But the worst part? The absolute worst part was the look on Clara's face. She wasn't embarrassed. She wasn't apologetic. She looked satisfied, like she'd been waiting weeks, maybe months, to say that out loud. And now that she had, she felt relief. She'd just humiliated me in front of her friends, questioned my manhood, my ability to provide, my worth as a husband, and she looked pleased about it. For a second, maybe two, I just sat there. Part of me wanted to sink into the floor. Part of me wanted to stand up and flip the table like we were in an action movie. Part of me wanted to yell, to defend myself, to explain that I worked my ass off and built a business from nothing and owned my house outright while these clowns were probably leveraged up to their eyeballs in debt. But then something else took over. Something calmer, colder, clearer. I smiled. Actually smiled. Not a fake smile, not a polite smile, but a genuine, almost peaceful smile. Because in that moment, I realized something important. I didn't need to explain myself to these people. I didn't need their approval or their respect. And I definitely didn't need to sit here and take abuse from a woman who valued status over substance. "Well, Clara," I said, my voice steady and calm, "if satisfaction comes with a receipt, maybe I should start invoicing you." Her face went red. Like tomato red. Fire engine red. I'm talking the kind of red that suggests blood pressure numbers that would concern a medical professional. "What did you just say to me?" she hissed. "You heard me. You just told this entire table that I can't provide for you. So let's talk numbers. Who pays the mortgage on our house? Me. Who paid cash for your car? Me. Who covers the health insurance, the utilities, the groceries, and yes, even that designer bag you're clutching right now like it's a life preserver? Also me." I stood up then, pulled out my wallet, and started counting out bills. Everyone at the table was staring, but I didn't care anymore. I was done. "So here's what we're going to do," I continued, placing money on the table. "This $42 covers my steak and my 2 beers. My portion of the meal. The part one consumed with my own mediocre, unsatisfying mouth." I looked around at all of them. Daniel with his hedge fund, Julian with his tech startup, Frederick with his yacht that he'd mentioned exactly 3 times now, and their wives who'd been sitting there judging me all night like I was some kind of charity case. "The rest of you financial gladiators can fight over the remaining $600 bill. Consider it practice for all that wealth management you're so good at. Good luck with that." Clara grabbed my arm, her nails digging in. "Don't you dare leave," she said through gritted teeth. I looked down at her hand, then back at her face. "Watch me." I pulled my arm free, grabbed my jacket from the back of the chair, and delivered my final line. And please, don't call me tomorrow unless the dishwasher explodes. Actually, scratch that. Even if the dishwasher explodes, call one of these guys. I'm sure their spreadsheets and stock portfolios will fix it right up. Then I turned and walked out of that restaurant like James Bond walking away from an explosion. Except instead of a tuxedo, I was wearing my work shirt adjacent button down. And instead of saving the world, I was just saving my dignity. The valet brought my truck around, and I tipped him $20 because unlike the people I'd just left behind, I actually appreciated people who worked for a living. Best $42 I ever spent. Let me tell you something about dramatic exits. They only work if you commit fully. There's no halfway point where you storm out, but then come back for your keys or your phone, or because you forgot to pay. Once you drop your money on the table and deliver your killer line, you've got to follow through like your life depends on it, because your dignity absolutely does. So there I was, walking through this fancy restaurant like I owned the place, weaving between tables of people who probably spent more on dinner than I spent on groceries in a month. And you know what? I felt amazing. Not in a fake, pretending everything is fine way, but genuinely, authentically amazing. Like I'd been holding my breath underwater for months and finally broke the surface. Every step toward that exit felt like shedding weight. The weight of pretending to be someone I wasn't. The weight of apologizing for having a job that actually mattered. The weight of sitting there listening to people measure their worth in yacht sizes and vacation destinations while treating me like I was some kind of embarrassing stain on Clara's perfect life. I could feel eyes on me as I walked. Other diners who'd probably heard at least some of the commotion, waiters who were trying not to stare, the hostess at the front who looked confused about why someone was leaving before dessert. But I kept my head up, shoulders back, walking like I had somewhere important to be. Which I did, technically. My couch. My couch and a cold beer and whatever game was on TV. That was my important appointment. The valet stand was right outside, and I handed my ticket to the same kid who'd looked at my truck earlier like it was a disappointing participation trophy. But this time, when he went to get it, I noticed something different in his expression. Maybe he'd heard the commotion inside. Maybe he just recognized the look of a man who'd had enough. Either way, when he pulled up in my F-150, he actually smiled. "Good truck, sir," he said, hopping down from the driver's seat. "My dad has one just like it, built like a tank." I pulled a 20 out of my wallet, which, granted, was looking a lot lighter after dropping $42 on a meal I didn't even finish, but whatever, and handed it to him. "Your dad's a smart man. These things run forever and actually do what they're supposed to do. Unlike most things in life." The kid's smile got wider. "Having a rough night?" I corrected. "Not anymore. Now I'm having a great night." And I meant it. I climbed into my truck, started the engine, which roared to life like the beautiful piece of machinery it was, and pulled out of that parking lot with the windows down and the radio up. Some classic rock station was playing "Take This Job and Shove It," which felt cosmically appropriate, so I cranked it even louder. The drive home took about 20 minutes, and I spent the entire time replaying the evening in my head. Not with regret or embarrassment, but with this weird sense of clarity. Like I was watching a movie where the protagonist finally figures out the plot twist. Clara didn't just think I wasn't good enough, she was ashamed of me. Actually, genuinely ashamed. Not because I'd done something wrong or failed at anything, but because my existence didn't fit into her carefully curated fantasy life. And her friends? They weren't even really her friends. They were props in some elaborate stage production where everyone competed to see who could spend the most money while pretending they weren't competing. Daniel with his hedge fund deals. Julian with his tech funding. Frederick with his goddamn yacht. They were all playing the same exhausting game, and Clara wanted me to play it too, except I didn't even know the rules and honestly didn't care to learn them. I thought about Frederick choking on his lobster when Clara dropped her little bombshell. That image alone was worth the price of admission. The guy probably hadn't experienced a genuine emotion in years, and suddenly he's confronted with real, messy, uncomfortable human conflict right there between the appetizers and the main course. I would have paid money to see his face again. That perfect combination of shock and scandal and just a hint of fascination, like he'd stumbled onto a reality TV show but forgot he was actually in the scene. By the time I pulled into my driveway attached to my house, that I bought with my own money from my mediocre job, I was actually laughing. Not bitter laughing, but real, genuine amusement at the absurdity of it all. I'd spent months trying to win the approval of people who weren't worth impressing. I'd let Clara make me feel small because I didn't wear a suit to work or know the difference between a Merlot and a Cabernet or give a damn about what kind of car my neighbors drove. Inside, the house was quiet, peaceful, mine. I kicked off my shoes, loosened my collar, and headed straight for the fridge where I kept the good beer, not the fancy craft stuff that costs $8 a bottle and tastes like someone made a mistake at the brewery, but solid, reliable, cold beer that did exactly what it was supposed to do. I cracked one open, sank into my couch, which I'd built myself, by the way, because why pay $3,000 for furniture when you can make something better for a fraction of the cost, and pulled out my phone. 17 missed calls from Clara. 17. And the texts were already rolling in. Mark, get back here right now. You are so embarrassing. I can't believe you just did that. Everyone is staring at me. I took a long sip of my beer and watched the messages keep coming. You need to come back and apologize. This is so typical of you. You always have to make everything about yourself. That last one made me laugh out loud. I made everything about myself. I'd spent the entire evening listening to her friends highlight reels of wealth and achievement while they collectively looked down at me for having the audacity to work with my hands. But sure, I was the self-centered one. Then came the shift. The messages changed tone around text number 12. Okay, I'm sorry. I didn't mean what I said. Can we please talk about this like adults? Mark, answer your phone. Fine. Be childish. See if I care. And then, about 30 minutes after I'd left, came the message that really sealed the deal. I didn't mean it. You know how I get around my friends. They bring out the worst in me. I stared at that text for a solid minute. They bring out the worst in me. Not I was wrong. Not I shouldn't have said those things. But basically, it's not really my fault because other people made me act that way. That's the thing about people who are never really sorry. They always find a way to make their apology about circumstances instead of choices. Clara didn't regret what she said. She regretted that I'd called her out on it in front of her precious friends. Another text came through. Olivia had to cover my part of the bill. And there it was. Not, I'm sorry I humiliated you. Not, I'm sorry I questioned your manhood in front of strangers. But your dramatic exit stuck me with a bill I couldn't pay. I typed back. Good. Maybe Olivia can satisfy you better than I can. Delete. Too petty. Even for this situation. I tried again. You told a table full of people that I can't provide for you. 5 hours later you're texting me because you can't afford dinner. Do you not see the irony? I hit send before I could second guess it. The 3 dots appeared immediately. Disappeared. Appeared again. This was going to be good. That's different and you know it. I didn't bring my credit card because I thought we were together. That's what couples do, Mark. They share expenses. We do share expenses, Clara. I pay most of them. That's literally the opposite of me not providing. You're twisting my words. No, I'm repeating them. There's a difference. The messages stopped for a while after that. I figured she'd either given up or found someone else to borrow money from. Either way worked for me. I channel surfed until I found a baseball game. Twins versus White Sox. Nothing crucial, just good background noise, and settled in. My phone buzzed a few more times, but I ignored it. Whatever Clara had to say could wait until I'd finished my beer and processed the fact that my marriage had basically imploded over a $65 steak. Around midnight, one final text came through. Can you at least Venmo me back for the Uber home? $47. I read it 3 times, each time getting more amazed by the sheer audacity. The woman who'd just told me I couldn't provide for her was asking me to send her money for a cab ride home from the restaurant where she'd publicly humiliated me. I typed back. Check with Frederick. I hear yacht owners are very generous. Then I turned my phone off completely, finished my beer, and went to bed in the center of the mattress for the first time in months, sprawled out like a starfish, taking up as much space as I wanted without worrying about anyone complaining that I was hogging the covers. I slept better that night than I had in years. You know what nobody tells you about blowing up your marriage in a fancy restaurant? The morning after is weirdly peaceful. I woke up around 7. No alarm, just natural wake-up time because my body's been trained by years of construction schedules. And for about 30 glorious seconds, I forgot the previous night had even happened. I just laid there, stretched out across the entire bed, sunlight coming through the window, no one nagging me about leaving my socks on the floor or breathing too loud or whatever other crimes against humanity I'd apparently been committing. Then reality kicked in, and I remembered. Oh right, I publicly called out my wife for being a materialistic snob, walked out on a $600 dinner bill, and told her friends they could fix plumbing problems with their stock portfolios. Cool, cool, cool. Totally normal Thursday night. I grabbed my phone from the nightstand. I turned it back on around 6 a.m. out of habit and immediately regretted that decision. 43 notifications. 43. I'm not exaggerating. I counted them twice to make sure my eyes weren't playing tricks on me. Most were from Clara, of course. She'd apparently spent the entire night cycling through the 5 stages of grief, except instead of acceptance at the end, she just looped back to anger and started over. The messages read like a psychological thriller. 11:47 p.m. I can't believe you left me there. 12:03 a.m. Everyone thinks you're insane. 12:34 a.m. Olivia said I deserved better. 1:15 a.m. I'm staying at Sophia's tonight. Don't wait up. Like I was sitting by the window with a candle, worried sick. 2:02 a.m. You know what? This is probably for the best. We need space. 2:45 a.m. I didn't mean that. Can we talk? 3:18 a.m. Mark, please. I know you're seeing these. 3:52 a.m. Fine. Ignore me. Very mature. Reading through them was like watching someone have an argument with themselves. I hadn't responded to a single one, but she'd somehow managed to have an entire conversation in her head and get mad at me for responses I never sent. But the real kicker was the last message, sent at 6:23 a.m. I'm coming by this afternoon to get some things. Please be decent about this. Be decent about this. Like I was the one who'd dropped a nuclear bomb in the middle of a public restaurant. Like I was the one who'd spent months making my spouse feel worthless because their job didn't come with a corner office and a pretentious title. I laid there for another few minutes, staring at the ceiling, trying to figure out how I felt about all this. Angry? Sure, a little. Hurt? Definitely. But underneath all that was something else, something I hadn't felt in months. Relief. Like I'd been carrying around a backpack full of bricks, and someone had finally told me I could put it down. My marriage had been dying for a while now. I could see that clearly in the morning light. Last night wasn't the cause. It was just the moment when we both stopped pretending everything was fine. Clara had been embarrassed by me for months, maybe longer. And I'd been trying so hard to be someone I wasn't, to fit into her world of fancy dinners and status symbols and friends who measured their worth in credit card limits. I got up, made coffee, the good stuff, not the fancy espresso Clara insisted on buying from that overpriced place downtown, and settled onto my couch with my laptop. I had some estimates to finish for potential jobs next week, but I couldn't focus. My phone kept buzzing like an angry hornet trapped in a jar. More messages from Clara. Then, and this was new, messages from numbers I didn't recognize. The first was from Olivia. Mark, I know last night was difficult, but Clara is really hurting. She needs you to be the bigger person here. I stared at that text for a solid minute. The bigger person? I wasn't the one who'd publicly announced that my spouse couldn't satisfy me. I wasn't the one who'd spent an entire evening looking down at someone for having an honest job. But sure, I should be the bigger person. Delete. Next message was from, Jesus Christ, Daniel. Hey buddy, just wanted to check in. Things got pretty heated last night. Maybe you should think about apologizing. Claire's a good woman. She was just upset. Buddy. He called me buddy. This guy had spent the entire dinner treating me like I was something he'd scraped off his shoe, and now he was texting me relationship advice like we were old pals. I typed back, thanks for the input, Dan. How's that hedge fund treating you? Still gambling with other people's retirement money. Delete before sending. Be the bigger person, right? The messages kept coming throughout the morning. Bianca sent me some passive-aggressive thing about how relationships require compromise and understanding. Sophia sent me a literal Bible verse about forgiveness, which was rich coming from someone who'd spent the previous evening bragging about a vacation that cost more than most people make in 6 months. But the one that really got me, the one that made me actually laugh out loud, was from Frederick. Mark, I've been married for 12 years. Take some advice from someone who knows. Sometimes you have to let your wife win the argument, even when she's wrong. It's just easier that way. Trust me. Let your wife win even when she's wrong. That was his advice. That was his marriage strategy. Just roll over and accept being treated like garbage because it's easier that way. No wonder he always looked like he'd rather be literally anywhere else whenever I'd seen him at social events. I put my phone face down on the coffee table and tried to focus on work. I had 3 estimates due by Monday, and at least one of them was for a major kitchen renovation that could pay my mortgage for 3 months. But every time I tried to concentrate on measurements and material costs, my brain would wander back to last night. The look on Clara's face when she'd said I couldn't satisfy her. The way her friends had gasped but also looked kind of thrilled, like they'd just witnessed drama they could gossip about for weeks. The feeling of walking out of that restaurant, knowing I was burning bridges but not caring because those bridges led nowhere I wanted to go anyway. Around noon, my buddy Jake called. Jake and I had gone to trade school together back in the day, and now he ran his own plumbing business. We grabbed beers once a month and complained about clients who thought YouTube made them experts. Dude, he said before I could even say hello. I just heard from Tommy, who heard from his wife, who heard from someone at her gym that you walked out on Clara at some fancy restaurant last night. Please tell me that's true and not just gossip. It's true, I said, leaning back into my couch. Very, very true. Holy shit. What happened? So I told him. The whole story. The dinner from hell, the vacation comparison Olympics, Clara's public announcement about my inadequacies, my $42 exit strategy. Jake was silent for most of it, except for a few choice curse words at particularly egregious moments. When I finished, he let out a low whistle. Man, that's rough. But also, kind of badass. I mean, you literally paid for your part and bounced. That's cold. I know. I'm still processing whether I should feel bad about it. Feel bad. Mark, she told a table full of people you couldn't satisfy her. In public. At a restaurant. That's grounds for justifiable homicide in some states. And you just walked away. You showed restraint, if anything. I laughed. It felt good to hear someone who wasn't lecturing me about being the bigger person or compromising or whatever other therapy speak Clara's friends were throwing around. So what now? Jake asked. You guys getting divorced? I don't know, man. Maybe. Probably. She's coming by later to get some stuff, which doesn't exactly scream, let's work this out. If she tries to take your tools, defend that shit with your life. Everything else is just stuff, but a man's tools are sacred. Appreciate the priorities, Jake. I'm serious. My buddy went through a divorce last year, and his ex tried to take his table saw in the settlement. Said it was joint property because they bought it during the marriage. He had to hide it at his dad's place. We talked for another 20 minutes about nothing important. Upcoming jobs, whether the Vikings would suck again this year. They would. Which hardware store had better prices on copper piping. Normal stuff. Guy stuff. The kind of conversation that didn't require me to know what Monaco was or care about thread counts or pretend I gave a damn about wine pairings. After we hung up, I felt better. Not great, but better. Like maybe I wasn't completely insane for standing up for myself. My phone buzzed again. Another text from Clara. I'll be there at 3. Please have my things ready. This doesn't need to be difficult. Her things. Like she was picking up dry cleaning. I looked around the house. Our house. Though I'd paid the down payment and the mortgage and pretty much everything else. What were her things exactly? The overpriced throw pillows she'd bought that made the couch uncomfortable? The decorative vases that served no actual purpose except to collect dust? The kitchen gadgets she'd insisted we needed but never used because she didn't actually cook? I started gathering stuff into boxes, not out of spite, but just to speed up whatever conversation we were about to have. I wasn't ready for a big emotional confrontation about our relationship. I wasn't ready to hear about how I'd embarrassed her or ruined her friendships or whatever other crimes I'd allegedly committed. I just wanted to get through the day without any more drama. By 2:45, I had 3 boxes packed with clothes, toiletries, shoes, and various items that screamed Clara. I left them by the door like a divorce care package. At exactly 3 p.m., because Clara was nothing if not punctual when she wanted to make a point, I heard a car door slam in the driveway. Then another one. Wait, another one. I looked out the window and saw Clara getting out of the driver's seat, but Olivia was climbing out of the passenger side. Of course she'd brought backup. Because God forbid she face her husband alone after publicly humiliating him. They walked up to the door together, Clara looking nervous but determined, Olivia looking like she was ready to mediate a hostage negotiation. I opened the door before they could knock. Hey, Clara said quietly. Hey, I replied, gesturing to the boxes. Your stuff's packed. Should be everything. but let me know if I missed anything. She looked at the boxes, then back at me, and I saw something flicker across her face. Surprise, maybe? Like she'd expected me to fight or beg or make this difficult, and instead I'd just helped her leave. Can we talk? She asked. Just for a few minutes? Olivia stepped forward like a referee entering the ring. I think that's a good idea. You two need to communicate about what happened, and Olivia, I said calmly. No offense, but this is between me and Clara. You can wait in the car. I don't think. In the car, Olivia. Unless you want to cover another bill for Clara, in which case you're welcome to stay, and we can all split a pizza. Clara's face went red, but Olivia actually backed off, retreating to the car with wounded dignity. Clara and I stood there in the doorway, the afternoon sun making everything feel too bright, too exposed. She looked tired. I probably looked tired too. I shouldn't have said what I said last night, she finally managed. It was cruel and unfair. Yeah, it was. But you shouldn't have left like that. You made me look terrible in front of my friends. And there it was. Not, I feel terrible about what I said. Not, I'm sorry I hurt you. But you made me look bad. I sighed. Clara, you made yourself look bad. I just refused to sit there and take it. There's a difference. They all think you're crazy now. Daniel said. I don't care what Daniel thinks. Or Frederick or Julian or any of them. They're not my friends, Clara. They're barely even your friends. They're just people you compete with about who can spend the most money on stuff nobody needs. She opened her mouth to argue, then closed it. For a second, I thought maybe she'd actually heard me. Maybe some part of what I said had gotten through. But then she just picked up one of the boxes and said, I'll come back for the rest later, and walked back to the car where Olivia was waiting with what I'm sure was a prepared speech about my character flaws. I watched them drive away, standing in my doorway, still holding my cold coffee from that morning. And you know what? I didn't feel sad. I didn't feel angry. I just felt free. The weekend after Clara moved out was weird in that specific way that big life changes always are. Like when you get a haircut that's way shorter than you intended, and you keep catching your reflection and thinking, who the hell is that? Except instead of hair, it was my entire marriage. I spent Saturday finishing up a bathroom renovation in Edina, which was good because staying busy meant not thinking about the fact that my house felt weirdly empty even though Clara had only taken like 3 boxes of stuff. Sunday morning, I woke up with a plan. I was going to be productive. None of this sitting around feeling sorry for myself garbage. I had a list of things my own house needed. The guest bathroom faucet had been dripping for 2 weeks. There was a loose board on the deck, and the garage door opener was making a sound like a dying whale. If I couldn't fix my marriage, at least I could fix literally everything else. So there I was at Home Depot at 8:30 on a Sunday morning, which is apparently when all the serious contractors and DIY dads do their shopping, wandering through the plumbing aisle trying to remember if I needed a 1/2-inch or 3/4-inch compression fitting. I had my phone out, squinting at a photo I'd taken of the faucet, when someone called my name. Mark? Mark Henderson. I turned around, and there was Lila Chun, standing there in yoga pants and an old college hoodie, holding a basket with what looked like paint samples and drawer pulls. It took me a second to place her, not because I didn't remember her, but because my brain was still in what size is this fitting mode and needed a minute to switch gears. Lila? Holy crap, how long has it been? Like 7 years? Maybe 8. She grinned, and it was the same smile I remembered from college. Genuine, warm, the kind of smile that made you feel like you were in on a joke together. Since graduation, I think. You look good. Well, except for the confused expression. Lost in the plumbing section. Story of my life, I said, laughing. I'm trying to fix a dripping faucet and apparently forgot how to identify basic pipe fittings. What about you? Don't tell me you're renovating something at 8 in the morning on a Sunday. Guest bedroom, she said, holding up the paint samples. I bought a house 6 months ago, and I'm finally getting around to making it look like an actual adult lives there instead of a college student who just discovered IKEA. It's a process. You bought a house? That's awesome. Where at? Minnetonka. Nothing fancy, but it's mine. Well, mine in the banks for the next 30 years, but still. She gestured at my basket, which had the faucet parts plus some wood stain and sandpaper. What about you? Working on a client's place or your own? My own. I've got this bad habit of fixing everyone else's houses and ignoring my own until things start actually breaking. The faucet's been dripping for like 2 weeks, and I finally decided to adult about it. We stood there in the aisle for a second, doing that thing where you run into someone from your past, and you're trying to figure out if this is going to be a quick, good to see you, by situation or an actual conversation. But Lila had always been easy to talk to. Back in college, we'd had a bunch of classes together, worked on a few group projects, grabbed coffee between lectures. She was studying nursing while I was in the trades program, and we bonded over being in practical fields while everyone else seemed to be majoring in things like communications or business administration, which as far as we could tell meant, I don't know what I want to do yet, but this sounds important. So you're still doing contracting? She asked. I remember you were always talking about starting your own business. Yeah, actually. I've had my own company for about 5 years now. Henderson Contracting. Mostly residential stuff, renovations, repairs, whatever keeps houses from falling apart. Her face lit up. Mark, that's incredible. Starting your own business is no joke. That takes serious guts. And right there, in the middle of the Home Depot plumbing aisle on a Sunday morning, I felt something I hadn't felt in months. Pride. Actual, genuine pride in what I did for a living. Not defensiveness, not the need to justify or explain, just simple pride. Because Lila wasn't asking me why I didn't have a real job or wondering when I was going to get serious about my career. She was just impressed that I'd done something difficult and made it work. Thanks, I said, and I meant it. It's been good. Hard sometimes, but good. What about you? You obviously finished nursing school. I see you nurse at Abbott Northwestern, she said. Just hit my 5-year mark, actually. It's intense, but I love it. Well, most days. Some days I come home and wonder why I chose a career where people yell at me about things I can't control, but then I have a patient who actually gets better and it makes it worth it. That's incredible, Lila. Seriously, ICU is hardcore. You're basically keeping people alive on a daily basis. She shrugged, but I could tell she was pleased. We all do our part, right? You keep people's houses standing. I keep people's hearts beating. Both pretty essential if you think about it. We talked for a few more minutes right there in the aisle, swapping stories about work disasters. She told me about a patient who tried to perform his own dental surgery with pliers. Note to self. Humans are horrifying. And I told her about the guy who tried to install his own gas line and nearly blew up his house. A Home Depot employee had to navigate around us twice, looking increasingly annoyed that we were blocking access to the pipe fittings. Hey, Lila said finally. I don't want to keep you from your faucet emergency, but we should catch up properly. Get coffee or something. It's been way too long, and I'd love to hear more about the business. Yeah, absolutely. I said, probably a little too quickly. I'd like that. Here, let me give you my number. We exchanged phones and punched in our contacts. Her profile picture was her hiking somewhere with mountains in the background, looking happy and windblown and nothing like the carefully posed, filtered photos Clara was always posting on Instagram. I'll text you, she said, heading toward the paint department. Don't let that faucet drip for another 2 weeks, Henderson. You're better than that. I laughed and watched her walk away, then stood there for probably 30 seconds too long, staring at a wall of brass fittings and thinking about how weird life was. A week ago, I was married and miserable. Now I was separated and somehow felt lighter than I had in months. And Lila, who I hadn't thought about in years, had just walked into my morning and made me remember what it felt like when someone was genuinely happy about your success instead of embarrassed by it. My phone buzzed in my pocket. Part of me expected it to be Clara with another passive-aggressive message about something I'd done wrong, but it was Lila. Found you in my contacts. Coffee Wednesday. There's a place near my house that doesn't charge $8 for a latte. I typed back. Wednesday works. And anywhere that doesn't require a mortgage for coffee gets my vote. 3 dots appeared then. It's a date. Well, not a date. A friend coffee thing. You know what I mean. I'm going to stop typing now before this gets weirder. I actually laughed out loud in the middle of Home Depot, which earned me a look from an elderly man comparing caulk guns. Friend coffee thing sounds perfect, I replied. See you Wednesday. I finished my shopping in a legitimately good mood, which was bizarre considering my marriage was imploding and I'd spent the previous week sleeping alone and eating cereal for dinner. But there was something about running into Lila that felt like the universe throwing me a bone. Like maybe everything falling apart with Clara wasn't the end of the world, but just the end of something that wasn't working anyway. When I got home and started fixing the faucet, which, for the record, Took exactly 20 minutes because I'm a professional and this is literally what I do. I kept thinking about the difference between how Clara had talked about my job versus how Lila had reacted. Clara acted like I should apologize for not working in an office. Lila acted like starting my own business was something to celebrate. Clara surrounded herself with people who measured worth in salary and status. Lila had spent the last 5 years in an ICU, dealing with literal life-and-death situations, and she was more impressed by the fact that I'd taken a risk and built something than she would have been if I'd told her I worked on Wall Street. The faucet stopped dripping. I tightened the final connection, turned the water back on, and watched as it worked perfectly. No leaks, no problems, just a functional faucet doing exactly what it was supposed to do. If only relationships were that simple, I thought. If only you could tighten a few connections, replace the worn-out parts, and have everything work perfectly again. But some things, once they break, aren't meant to be fixed. Sometimes you just have to accept that it's time for a replacement. I grabbed a beer from the fridge, sat on my deck in the afternoon sun, and texted Jake. Just ran into an old friend from college. We're getting coffee Wednesday. His response was immediate. Is this friend hot? Irrelevant. She's just a friend. That's not a no. I looked at Lila's profile picture again. The hiking photo with the genuine smile and the wind-blown hair and the complete lack of trying too hard. Okay, fine. She's cute. But seriously, just a friend. Sure, buddy. Keep telling yourself that. Meanwhile, how's the divorce going? Not divorced yet. Separated. Maybe. I don't know. It's complicated. Life's too short for complicated, man. Get coffee with your cute friend. Fix some houses. Be happy. Clara can go compare yacht sizes with Frederick or whatever the hell those people do. I smiled, took a sip of my beer, and realized that Jake was absolutely right. Life was too short to spend it feeling small around people who should have been building you up. Wednesday couldn't come fast enough. Wednesday arrived with the kind of nervous energy I hadn't felt since high school, which was ridiculous because this was just coffee with an old friend. Just two people who used to study together catching up after 7 years. Totally normal. Completely casual. Nothing to overthink. Except I changed my shirt 3 times before leaving the house, which was 2.5 times more than I usually did for anything that wasn't a wedding or a funeral. First I wore my usual work polo, then decided that looked too casual, then put on a button-down, then decided that looked like I was trying too hard, then went back to a different polo that was somewhere in between. At one point I caught myself checking if my jeans had any paint stains and realized I'd officially lost my mind. The coffee shop Lila had suggested was called The Grind, which I appreciated because it was a straightforward name without any pretentious French words or unnecessary umlauts. It was in a strip mall in Minnetonka, tucked between a dry cleaner and a pet supply store, and when I walked in at exactly 10 a.m., because apparently I was punctual now when I actually wanted to be somewhere, the smell of coffee and fresh pastries hit me like a warm hug. Lila was already there, sitting at a table by the window with 2 cups in front of her. She waved when she saw me, and I noticed she'd beaten me to the punch on buying drinks. I got you a regular coffee, she said as I sat down. Black, 2 sugars. Unless your taste has changed in 7 years, in which case I'm a presumptuous asshole and you can throw this at me. No, that's perfect. That's exactly right. I was genuinely impressed she remembered. How much do I owe you? Please. It's $3. I think I can handle it. Besides, you can get the next one. The next one. Like this was already going to be a regular thing. I liked that she'd assumed that. We started with the easy stuff, talking about college, remembering professors we'd loved and hated, laughing about that time our entire construction management class had accidentally locked themselves out of the workshop and had to call campus security. She told me about nursing school, which sounded absolutely brutal. Apparently, they just throw you into hospitals and expect you to figure out how to keep people alive while running on 4 hours of sleep and vending machine food. I cried in a supply closet at least twice a week during my first year of clinicals, she admitted, wrapping her hands around her coffee cup. There was this one supply closet on the 4th floor that became my unofficial breakdown spot. I'm pretty sure the janitors knew, but were nice enough to pretend they didn't. That's intense. I can't even imagine that kind of pressure. What about you? Starting a business must have been terrifying. I shrugged. Different kind of scary, I guess. Like, if I mess up, nobody dies. They just have a crooked cabinet or a leaky pipe. But yeah, those first couple years were rough. I was working 16-hour days, doing everything myself, convinced I was going to go bankrupt and have to move back in with my parents. But you didn't. Nope. Somehow kept it together. Built a reputation. Now I actually have to turn down jobs sometimes because I'm booked out weeks in advance, which is a problem I never thought I'd have. She smiled, and it was that genuine impressed smile that I'd seen at Home Depot. Mark, that's seriously amazing. You built something from nothing. That takes real courage. And there it was again. That feeling of being seen and appreciated for what I actually did instead of being judged for what I didn't do. With Clara, every conversation about work eventually became about what I should be doing differently, what I should aspire to, how I should present myself. With Lila, it was just acknowledgement. Recognition that what I did mattered and was valuable. So, she said, taking a sip of her coffee, I have to ask because I'm nosy and it's been 7 years. What's your life look like now? Besides the business. Are you married? Kids? Living that suburban dad dream? I must have made a face because she immediately backtracked. Oh no, did I just step in something? I'm sorry, you don't have to. No, it's fine, I said, maybe a little too quickly. I'm married. Technically. It's complicated. Complicated how? And here's the thing about Lila. She asked it without judgment, without that eager gossip-hungry tone some people get when they sense drama. She just asked like she genuinely wanted to understand. So I told her, not everything. I wasn't about to unload the entire Clara saga on her during our first coffee in 7 years, but I gave her the highlights. Married for 3 years. Wife works in fashion. Different worlds. Growing apart. Recent fight that made me realize maybe we'd been apart for a while already. We're separated right now. I finished. She moved out last weekend. I'm honestly not sure if we're getting divorced or just taking space or what. Everything's kind of up in the air. Lila was quiet for a second, processing. That sounds really hard. I'm sorry you're going through that. Thanks. Honestly, though, I feel weirdly okay about it. Like, it sucks, don't get me wrong. But it also feels like I've been holding my breath for months and finally got to exhale. Does that make sense? Complete sense. I dated this guy for 2 years in nursing school. We were supposedly perfect together. All our friends said so. We looked good on paper. But I was exhausted all the time from trying to be whatever version of myself he wanted. When we finally broke up, I felt guilty for being relieved. Like I should have been devastated, but mostly I just felt free. Exactly. That's exactly it. Free. We sat there for a minute, both nursing our coffees, and I realized this was the first real conversation I'd had in months where I didn't feel like I was being judged or measured against some impossible standard. Lila wasn't comparing me to her friends' husbands. She wasn't mentally calculating whether I was successful enough or impressive enough. She was just present, listening, being a person talking to another person. Okay, subject change, she said, brightening. Tell me about this house of yours. You said you've been ignoring repairs for your own place while fixing everyone else's. I laughed. Yeah, it's bad. I'm like the mechanic whose car is always broken. But it's a good house. I bought it 4 years ago in South Minneapolis. 3-bedroom, 2-bath. Needed work when I got it, but that's why I could afford it. I fixed most of the major stuff. Now it's just the endless list of little things. I would kill for someone who actually knows how to fix things. I've owned my house for 6 months, and I'm still intimidated by the circuit breaker. Last week my garbage disposal stopped working, and I legitimately Googled how to garbage disposal like it was a verb. It kind of is a verb. And garbage disposals are easy. Usually it's just something stuck in the blades or the reset button got tripped. Takes like 5 minutes to fix. Her eyes went wide. There's a reset button? Where? Bottom of the unit. Little red button. Fixes it like 80% of the time. You just changed my life. I've been doing dishes by hand for a week because I was afraid to call a plumber and get charged $200 to be told I'm an idiot. You're not an idiot. You're just not a plumber. There's a difference. Here, I grabbed a napkin and drew a quick diagram of a garbage disposal with the reset button marked. Try this first next time. If that doesn't work, then yeah, call someone. Or call me. I'll fix it for free. She looked at the napkin like I'd just handed her a treasure map. You do that? Sure. I mean, what are old friends for if not free appliance repair? Most of my old friends just like my Instagram posts and never actually talk to me. You're already exceeding expectations. We talked for another hour, and somewhere in there our coffees got refilled. She insisted on paying again. I insisted on getting the next round. We compromised by splitting them. And the conversation flowed so easily it felt like no time had passed since college. She told me about working in the ICU during COVID, which sounded absolutely horrifying, and I told her about the guy who'd hired me to build a deck and then insisted on helping by giving me constant advice from YouTube videos, which was a different kind of horrifying. I should probably get going, Lila said eventually, checking her phone. I've got a shift at 3 and I need to at least pretend I'm a functional adult who eats lunch before work. Yeah, I've got an estimate to do in an hour anyway. I stood up, suddenly not wanting this to end. This was really nice, Lila. I'm glad we ran into each other. Me too. She grabbed her jacket, then paused. Hey, I know you're going through stuff right now with your marriage and everything, but if you want to hang out again, just as friends, no pressure. I'd like that. Maybe we could actually do dinner next time? There's this Thai place near my house that doesn't require a mortgage to eat at. The way she said it, acknowledging my situation but not making it weird, offering friendship without expectations, made me like her even more. Thai food sounds perfect, I said. I'm free most evenings. Perks of being separated. Nobody's scheduling my life for me anymore. She laughed. I'll text you. And Mark? For what it's worth, whoever your wife is, if she doesn't appreciate what you've built and what you do, that's her loss. Seriously, I watched her leave, pushing through the door into the October afternoon, and stood there like an idiot for a solid 30 seconds before the barista asked if I needed anything else. In the truck, I sat for a minute before starting the engine, realizing that I was smiling. Actually, genuinely smiling. Not the fake smile I'd been wearing for months around Clara's friends. Not the customer service smile I used with difficult clients. Just a real, honest-to-God smile because I'd spent 2 hours with someone who made me feel like myself. The good version of myself that I'd almost forgotten existed. My phone buzzed. I expected work stuff, but it was Lila. Just realized I monopolized like 70% of that conversation. Next time you're talking more. Those are the rules. I typed back. Deal. But fair warning, most of my stories involve plumbing disasters and difficult clients. Even better, I love a good disaster story. Talk soon. I drove to my estimate appointment still smiling, and when the client asked why I seemed so cheerful, I told her I'd just had a really good cup of coffee, which was technically true, even if the coffee wasn't really the point. Life has this funny way of going from zero to absolute chaos in about 30 seconds flat, which is exactly what happened the following Tuesday evening. I'd spent the day finishing up a bathroom remodel in Edina. New tile, refinished vanity, one of those fancy rainfall shower heads that the clients were absolutely thrilled about. Good, honest work that left me tired but satisfied, which was pretty much my ideal state of being these days. I got home around 6, grabbed a beer from the fridge, and was seriously contemplating whether I had the energy to cook actual food or if cereal counted as dinner for the 3rd time that week. That's when my phone rang. Not a text, an actual phone call, which nobody under 40 does anymore unless it's an emergency, or they're your mom. It was my mom. Marcus William Henderson, she said, using my full name, which meant I was either in trouble or she had opinions with a capital O. I just got off the phone with your wife. Ex-wife, I wanted to say, but technically we weren't divorced yet, so I let it slide. What did Clara want? She called me crying. Said you abandoned her at some restaurant, that you've been cruel and refusing to communicate, and that she just wants to work things out, but you won't talk to her. My mom paused, and I could practically hear her raising her eyebrow through the phone. That's her version. What's the real story? So I told her. The whole thing. The dinner from hell, Clara's friends and their status Olympics, the public humiliation, my $42 exit. I half expected my mom to lecture me about marriage being work and compromise and all that stuff parents say when they think you're giving up too easily. Instead, she said, good for you. Wait, what? Good. For you. Mark, I've been biting my tongue about that girl for 2 years now. She's always treated you like you're some kind of project that needs fixing. If she couldn't brag about you to her fancy friends, then she doesn't deserve you. Period. Mom. No, I'm serious. Your father and I didn't raise you to be someone's accessory. You build a business from nothing. You own your own home. You're kind and hardworking, and you show up when people need you. If that's not good enough for Clara, then Clara can kick rocks. I actually laughed. My mom, who taught Sunday school and volunteered at the library and said, "Oh my stars," instead of swearing, had just told my wife to kick rocks. Thanks, Mom. I needed to hear that. You're my son. I'm contractually obligated to be on your side. But I'm also right. Don't let her guilt you into thinking you're the problem here. You're not. We talked for a few more minutes. She wanted to know if I was eating properly, debatable. And if I needed her to bring over some casseroles, absolutely yes. And by the time we hung up, I felt exponentially better. There's something about your mom validating your life choices that hits different than friends doing it. I just cracked open my beer and found a frozen pizza in the back of the freezer when my doorbell rang. Which was weird because I wasn't expecting anyone, and most of my friends just texted before showing up. I looked through the peephole and almost dropped my beer. Clara was standing on my porch, and she looked like she'd been through some kind of emotional hurricane. Her mascara was running. Actually running, not artfully smudged for effect. She was wearing sweatpants and an oversized hoodie, which for Clara was basically the equivalent of showing up in a potato sack. And she was dragging 2 designer suitcases behind her like she'd just fled the country. I opened the door, mostly out of shock. "Clara? What are you?" "Mark," she interrupted, and her voice was shaky in that way that suggested she'd been crying for a while. "I was wrong. About everything. I was so wrong, and I need you to know that." I just stood there, beer in hand, trying to process this moment. What happened to staying at Sophia's? I can't stay there anymore. She's been. It doesn't matter. The point is, I realized that I messed up. Badly. I've spent the last week thinking about what I said at that restaurant, about how I've been treating you, and Mark, I'm so sorry. She looked up at me with red, puffy eyes. "Can I come in? Please? I want to move back in. I want to fix this. Now, here's the thing about dramatic apologies from people who've wronged you. They're designed to make you feel like you're the bad guy if you don't immediately forgive them." Clara standing on my porch looking devastated was engineered, consciously or not, to trigger my protective instincts, to make me want to fix her problems like I fixed everyone else's leaky faucets and broken cabinets. But I'd learned something over the past week and a half. Not everything that's broken needs to be fixed. Sometimes things break because they were never put together right in the first place. "Clara," I said slowly, "I don't think that's a good idea. Please, Mark. I know I hurt you. I know I was awful and selfish and I didn't appreciate what I had. But I love you. I do. I just got caught up in trying to impress people who don't even matter, and I lost sight of what's actually important." She was saying all the right words. The words I'd wanted to hear for months. But they felt hollow somehow, like she'd rehearsed them on the drive over. "Where have you been staying?" I asked, dodging the bigger conversation. "With Olivia, then Sophia, then Bianca. But none of them." She stopped herself, biting her lip. "It doesn't matter. I don't want to stay with them. I want to come home. This is my home too." "Actually," I said, leaning against the doorframe, "legally speaking, it's my home. I bought it before we got married. Your name's not on the deed." Her face did something complicated. Hurt mixed with anger, mixed with desperation. "Are you seriously pulling the "it's my house" card right now?" "I'm just stating facts, Clara. You walked out. You moved your stuff out. You made it pretty clear you were done. I was upset. You embarrassed me." "No," I said, and my voice was calmer than I expected. "You embarrassed yourself. I just refused to sit there and take it." We stood there in this standoff. Her on the porch with her suitcases, me in the doorway with my beer, and I could see her trying to figure out her next move. The tears, the apology, the vulnerability, none of it was working the way she'd expected. That's when headlights swept across the driveway. A Honda CR-V pulled in behind Clara's car, and I knew exactly who it was before the door even opened. Lila stepped out, holding 2 bags of Thai food and a bottle of wine, looking casual and comfortable in jeans and a sweater. She stopped when she saw Clara, clearly recognizing that she'd walked into something. "Oh," Lila said, looking between us. "I'm sorry, I didn't realize you had company. I can come back." "Who is she?" Clara's voice had gone from desperate to sharp in about half a second. I looked at Lila, who was standing there holding takeout, and probably regretting every decision that had led to this moment, and then back at Clara, whose face had transformed from tear-stained desperation to something harder. "That's Lila," I said calmly. "She's a friend from college. We ran into each other at Home Depot last weekend, and we've been catching up." "Catching up," Clara repeated flatly. "With Thai food and wine. At 7 o'clock at night." "Yeah, exactly that. We were going to watch a movie and hang out, because that's what friends do." Lila, bless her heart, stepped forward with a smile that was friendly but not apologetic. Hi, I'm Lila. I'm a nurse at Abbott Northwestern. Mark and I went to school together like a million years ago. She held up the food bags. I brought pad thai and spring rolls if there's enough to share. I always order too much anyway. The sheer normalcy of Lila's introduction seemed to throw Clara completely off balance. She'd clearly been expecting, I don't know, some kind of femme fatale homewrecker situation. Instead, she got a nurse in a cozy sweater offering to share appetizers. Clara looked at me, and I could see her doing the math. You're dating her? Already? We've been separated for like a week. We're not dating, I said. We're friends. She's helping me remember what it's like to hang out with someone who actually likes me for who I am instead of being embarrassed by my existence. That landed like I'd intended it to. Clara flinched. Mark, that's not fair. Yes, it is, and you know it. I wasn't being mean, just honest. Clara, you spent months making me feel like I wasn't good enough. Like my job was shameful, like my life was mediocre, like I was some kind of disappointment you had to explain to your friends. And then you told me in front of all those people that I couldn't satisfy you or provide for you. So yeah, I'm spending time with someone who doesn't make me feel like crap about myself. Sue me. Lila had gone very still, clearly putting together pieces of a story she'd only heard parts of. Her expression had shifted from uncomfortable to something else. Understanding, maybe, or sympathy. Clara's eyes were filling with tears again, but they looked different now. Less calculated, more genuine. I didn't mean it. I was showing off, trying to fit in with them, and I said something terrible. But Mark, please. No, I said quietly but firmly. I'm done with please. I'm done with apologies that only come after you've run out of other options. You didn't want to come back here because you missed me or because you realized what we had was valuable. You want to come back because staying with your friends didn't work out and you need a place to crash. That's not true, isn't it? Be honest, Clara. If Sophia or Bianca had let you stay indefinitely, would you be here right now with suitcases and tears? She opened her mouth, closed it, opened it again. Couldn't answer. That's what I thought, I said. I felt Lila shift uncomfortably behind me, and I realized we were having this incredibly personal conversation in front of someone who barely knew either of us. Look, Clara, I don't hate you. I'm not trying to punish you, but I can't let you move back in and pretend everything's fine. It's not fine. It hasn't been fine for a long time. So that's it. Her voice broke. You're just giving up? Throwing away 3 years of marriage. I'm not throwing anything away. You did that at the restaurant. I'm just accepting reality. We stood there for another moment, the October evening getting darker, the temperature dropping. Clara looked at her suitcases, then at Lila, then at me. I guess I'll go stay with my parents, she said finally, her voice small. That's probably for the best. She grabbed her suitcase handles, dragging them back toward her car with a defeated slump to her shoulders that almost made me feel guilty. But then I remembered the look on her face when she'd said I couldn't satisfy her, remembered months of subtle put-downs and embarrassment, and the guilt evaporated. Clara's car pulled out of my driveway with all the drama of a soap opera finale, tires squealing slightly, brake lights flashing like angry red eyes, the whole production. I watched her disappear down the street, dragging her designer suitcases and wounded pride back to whatever refuge would take her in, and I felt nothing. Not satisfaction, not guilt, not sadness. Just a profound sense of, well, that happened. I turned back to find Lila standing on my porch, still holding the Thai food, looking like she'd accidentally walked into someone else's therapy session and wasn't sure if she should apologize or run. So, she said carefully, that was Clara. Yep, that was Clara. I gestured toward the door. Please tell me you're still hungry, because I desperately need those spring rolls and possibly that entire bottle of wine. She laughed, some of the tension breaking. I think I need the wine too after that encounter. I'm so sorry I showed up in the middle of whatever that was. Don't apologize. Honestly, your timing was perfect. If you hadn't shown up, I might have actually listened to her whole speech and started feeling guilty, which would have been a disaster. I held the door open. Come on in. Fair warning. The place is a mess because I'm a cliché bachelor who's been eating cereal for dinner and leaving dishes in the sink. I'm a nurse. I've seen worse. Much, much worse. Inside, we set up the food on my coffee table because the dining room table was currently covered in work estimates and hardware catalogs that I hadn't gotten around to organizing. Lila poured wine into the only 2 clean glasses I could find. One was a coffee mug that said, world's okayest contractor. The other was an actual wine glass Clara had insisted we needed for entertaining, which we'd done exactly never. I have to ask, Lila said, settling onto the couch with her spring rolls, because that was intense, and I feel like I only got half the story. What exactly happened at this restaurant? So I told her everything. The full, unedited version. The fancy dinner with Clara's status-obsessed friends. The vacation comparison Olympics. Frederick and his yacht that he'd mentioned 3 times. And then Clara's grand finale announcement about how I couldn't satisfy or provide for her. Lila's expressions throughout were priceless. Shock, disgust, disbelief, and finally, anger. She said what? Lila nearly choked on her spring roll. In public? In front of all those people? Yep. Pretty much broadcasted my inadequacies to the entire table like she was reading the evening news. Mark, that's not just mean, that's cruel. That's emotional abuse disguised as honesty. She took a long sip of wine. And let me guess, her friends just sat there? Some action thing with explosions and terrible dialogue that neither of us really paid attention to because we kept pausing it to talk. Lila told me about her last disastrous relationship, which had ended when she'd caught her boyfriend texting his ex while they were on vacation. I told her about the time Clara had tried to get me to quit contracting and go work for her friend's husband's company doing facility management, which was apparently code for be a glorified janitor in an office building. She wanted you to give up your own business to manage someone else's building? Lila looked genuinely appalled. That's insane, right? Like I'm going to throw away 5 years of building my reputation and client base to wear a polo shirt with someone else's company logo and fix copy machines all day. Did you tell her that was insane? In slightly more diplomatic terms, yeah? She didn't speak to me for 3 days. I'm starting to understand why you're separated. Around 10:30, Lila checked her phone and sighed. I should probably head out. I've got an early shift tomorrow, and if I don't get at least 6 hours of sleep, I'm going to accidentally kill someone with the wrong medication dosage. That's a terrifying sentence that I'm going to assume is a joke. It's like 85% a joke. I walked her to the door, and we stood there in that slightly awkward moment where you're not sure if you're supposed to hug or handshake or just wave goodbye like a doofus. Thanks for tonight, I said. I know you didn't sign up for front row seats to my marital implosion, but I appreciate you rolling with it. Are you kidding? That was better than anything on Netflix. Plus, the pad thai was excellent and the company was even better. She smiled, and it was that same warm, genuine smile that made me remember why I'd liked her so much in college. We should do this again. Maybe with less drama next time, but no promises given your life right now. Deal. And hey, I caught her before she turned to leave. I mean it. Thanks. For seeing me as, like, an actual person instead of a disappointment or a project or whatever. It matters more than you probably realize. She squeezed my arm. Mark Henderson, you're not a disappointment. You're not a project. You're just a good guy who got married to the wrong person. It happens. But it doesn't mean there's anything wrong with you. I watched her drive away, her taillights disappearing into the October night, and I stood there on my porch for probably too long, feeling something I hadn't felt in years, hopeful. Not desperate hope, not delusional hope, just quiet, steady hope that maybe my life wasn't falling apart, but actually falling into place. Over the next few weeks, things developed a rhythm. Clara called a few more times, but each call felt less urgent, less dramatic. She'd moved back to her parents' house in Bloomington, which apparently was going about as well as you'd expect for a 32-year-old woman who'd gotten used to being independent. Her mom kept asking when she was going to fix things with her husband. Her dad kept making pointed comments about how people who couldn't afford their own rent probably shouldn't have been eating at expensive restaurants. I almost felt bad for her. Almost. Lila and I fell into an easy pattern of hanging out 2 or 3 times a week. Sometimes dinner, sometimes just coffee. Once we went to a Twins game and ate overpriced hot dogs and complained about the bullpen. It was casual and comfortable and completely drama-free, which was exactly what I needed. She'd come over and we'd cook together. Actual cooking, not just heating up frozen pizza. And she'd tell me horror stories from the ICU while I told her about clients who thought they knew more than me because they'd watched 3 YouTube videos. This guy yesterday tried to tell me I was installing his toilet wrong. I told her one night while we were making tacos in my kitchen. Literally argued with me about toilet installation. Said he'd seen a different technique online that was faster. Was it actually faster? It was completely wrong and would have flooded his bathroom within a week, but sure, technically faster. I had to spend 20 minutes explaining basic plumbing physics to a guy who probably failed high school science. That's like patients who try to diagnose themselves with WebMD and then argue when I tell them they don't actually have malaria. Sir, you live in Minnesota. You have the flu. We laughed, and I realized this was what I'd been missing. Someone who got it. Someone who understood that work was frustrating and funny and sometimes absurd, but that didn't mean it wasn't valuable. Someone who saw my calloused hands and thought, oh, he works hard, instead of EW, manual labor. 6 weeks after the restaurant incident, I got a text from an unknown number. It was from Olivia. Mark, I thought you should know. Clara's moving to Chicago. She got a job offer with some fashion company there. She's leaving next week. I stared at that text for a solid minute, trying to figure out how I felt about it. Relief, mostly. A little sadness for what could have been if we'd been different people. But mostly just acceptance. I texted back, thanks for letting me know. I hope it works out for her. That night, Lila came over with Chinese food and found me on the couch, looking contemplative. You okay? She asked, setting down the takeout bags. Clara's moving to Chicago. New job. Fresh start. How do you feel about that? I thought about it. Really thought about it. Honestly, I'm happy for her. Chicago might be better for her. More of that high fashion scene she loves. New people to impress. And it makes the whole divorce situation cleaner. No awkward run-ins at Target or mutual friends trying to get us to reconcile at parties. That's a very mature perspective. I'm trying this new thing where I don't let toxic situations drag me down. It's experimental, but early results are promising. She laughed and started unpacking the food. Well, for what it's worth, I think you're handling all this really well. Not everyone could have their marriage implode and come out the other side actually seeming happier. That's because I've got good people around me. I looked at her, and something shifted in the air between us. Not dramatic, not sudden, just a quiet recognition of something that had been building for weeks. Really good people. She held my gaze for a second, smiling. Yeah, you do. 3 months later, I was finishing up a kitchen renovation in Wyzetta when my phone buzzed with a notification. Clara had filed the divorce papers. No drama, no fight, just clean paperwork requesting an uncontested divorce with minimal assets to split since we'd kept most of our finances separate. I signed them that afternoon. That weekend, Lila and I went hiking at Minnehaha Falls. Her idea, because apparently I needed more outdoor activities in my life, beyond just working on people's decks. We sat on a bench overlooking the falls, drinking coffee from a thermos she'd brought, and I told her about the papers. How does it feel, she asked, being officially divorced? Like closing a chapter on a book that should have ended a long time ago. Relieving, mostly. I turned to look at her. And kind of exciting, actually. Like there's space now for new chapters. Better chapters. Better chapters, huh? She was smiling. That knowing smile that suggested she knew exactly what I was implying. Yeah. Chapters with less drama, more Thai food, and people who appreciate a good garbage disposal repair. She laughed, and the sound mixed with the rush of the waterfall, and I thought about how weird life was. 6 months ago, I'd been married and miserable, trying to squeeze myself into a life that didn't fit. Now I was divorced and somehow happier than I'd been in years, sitting on a bench with a woman who liked me for exactly who I was. Paint-stained jeans, contractor hands, and all. Sometimes the best revenge isn't yelling or fighting or proving people wrong. Sometimes the best revenge is just living well, laughing louder, and building a life with people who actually give a damn about the real you. Clara had wanted status and image and a husband who looked good on paper. What she'd gotten instead was exactly what she deserved. A life in Chicago surrounded by more people exactly like her friends, probably still trying to impress strangers who didn't actually care. As for me, I got my house, my business, my self-respect, and eventually, someone who thought fixing things for a living was actually pretty cool. Turns out, you can't pay bills with image points. But you can build a pretty damn good life with honesty, hard work, and people who value substance over status. And yeah, Lila and I started officially dating about a month after that hike. But that's a whole other story. One that involves significantly less drama, way better food, and exactly 0 mentions of yachts.